The fires had been burning for 30 cycles now. Ambassador Cole stood at the broken window of what used to be the Grand Assembly Hall of Velen Prime. He watched the orange glow on the horizon where the city of Marek once stood. Now it was nothing but ash and smoke. His people were dying. The Drath Collective had come without warning. Their ships appeared in the sky like a swarm of angry insects, blocking out the twin suns. Within hours, they had destroyed the planetary defense grid. Within days, they had taken control of the orbital stations. Now, after 30 cycles of siege, they were slowly squeezing the life out of Velen Prime. Cole was old. His blue skin had faded to a pale gray, and his forearms trembled when he walked. But his mind was still sharp. He had served as ambassador for over 200 cycles. He had seen wars. He had negotiated peace treaties. He had believed that diplomacy could solve any problem. He had been wrong. A young aide rushed into the chamber. Her name was Sarah, and she was barely 20 cycles old. Too young to remember the last great war. Too young to understand what was coming. "Ambassador," she said, her voice shaking. "The southern continent has fallen. The Drath are moving toward the capital." Cole closed his eyes. He felt the weight of every life on his shoulders. Millions of his people had already died. Millions more would follow unless something changed. "Have we received any response from the Galactic Council?" he asked. Sarah shook her head. "The Council says they cannot intervene. The Drath Collective is too powerful. They fear starting a larger war." Cole laughed bitterly. A larger war? As if the slaughter of his entire species was not war enough. "There must be someone," he said quietly. "Someone willing to help." Sarah hesitated. She looked at her datapad, then back at the ambassador. There was something in her eyes. Fear, perhaps. Or maybe just uncertainty. "There is one option we have not tried," she said slowly. "The humans." Cole turned to face her. The humans. He had heard the stories, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had heard the stories. They came from a world called Earth, a Class 12 death world at the edge of the galaxy. A planet of poison air and crushing gravity. A world where everything tried to kill everything else. Where even the plants could end your life. The humans had joined the Galactic Council only 50 cycles ago. They seemed friendly enough. They smiled a lot. They talked about peace and cooperation. They built hospitals and schools on struggling worlds. They seemed almost gentle, but there were other stories. Darker stories. Stories about what happened when humans were pushed too far. Stories about their history, their wars, their capacity for violence that made even the Drath look tame. Stories about a species that had evolved as both predator and prey, that had learned to fight from the moment they could walk. Most members of the council tried not to think about those stories. "The humans," Cole repeated. "Do you think they would help us?" "I do not know," Sarah admitted. "But we have no other choice." Cole nodded slowly. She was right. They had no other choice. He walked to the communication terminal and activated the long-range transmitter. His hands were steady now. When you have lost everything, fear becomes meaningless. "This is Ambassador Cole of Velen Prime," he began, his voice clear and strong despite his age. "I am sending this message to the United Earth government. Our world is under attack. The Drath Collective has blockaded our planet. They are bombing our cities. They are killing our people. We have no military force capable of stopping them. The Galactic Council has refused to help." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "We ask for humanitarian aid. Food for our starving. Medicine for our wounded. Shelter for our homeless. We ask for nothing more. We know we cannot defeat the Drath. We only hope to survive them." He ended the transmission and stepped back from the terminal. "Now we wait," he said. Message traveled across the stars at speeds that would have seemed impossible just a few centuries ago. It passed through relay stations and communication buoys, crossing thousands of light years in a matter of hours. Finally, it reached a blue and green planet orbiting a yellow sun. Earth. Admiral Han Yuna was sitting in her office aboard the command carrier Eternal Dawn when the message arrived. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and black hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore the simple gray uniform of the United Earth Fleet, with no decorations except for the Admiral's stars on her collar. She had been reviewing supply reports when her second-in-command, Captain Coyote, entered the room. He was a tall man with a serious face and hands that showed the scars of a dozen battles. "Admiral," he said, "we have received a priority transmission from Velen Prime." Han Yuna set down her datapad. "Show me." Coyote activated the holographic display. Ambassador Cole's face appeared, flickering slightly due to the vast distance the signal had traveled. Han Yuna listened to his words without expression. She watched the footage that accompanied the message. Burning cities, fleeing refugees, children crying in the ruins of their homes. When the transmission ended, she sat in silence for a long moment. "The Drath Collective," she said finally. "I know them. They attacked the mining colony on Proxima 7 3 years ago. Killed 200 of our workers before we could respond." "Yes, Admiral," Coyote confirmed. "We drove them off, but they never faced true consequences. The Council said it was a misunderstanding." Han Yuna's jaw tightened. "A misunderstanding." She stood and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the curve of Earth below. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. Her home. The home of 8 billion humans who had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting to survive on a world that tried to kill them every single day. "They are asking for humanitarian aid," Coyote said carefully. "Food, medicine. Should I contact the civilian relief agencies?" Han Yuna did not answer immediately. She was thinking about the children in that footage. The fear in their eyes. The flames reflected on their faces. "How many ships does the Drath Collective have in the system?" she asked. Tay checked his datapad. "Intelligence estimates approximately 40 warships, Admiral, plus support vessels and ground forces." "And how many ships do we have available?" Coyote hesitated. He knew where this was going. "The Third Fleet is currently in reserve. 312 combat vessels, fully armed and crewed." Han Yuna nodded slowly. A small smile appeared on her lips, but it did not reach her eyes. "Contact Fleet Command," she said. "Tell them we are responding to a humanitarian crisis on Velen Prime." "Admiral?" Coyote looked confused. "Are we sending relief supplies?" Han Yuna turned to face him. Her eyes were cold now, hard. The eyes of someone who had seen too much death and had decided that enough was enough. "We are sending aid, Captain. The Velen people asked for help, and we will give them help. But we will not watch another world burn while we hand out blankets and bandages. The Drath want a war? They will get one." She activated the fleet-wide communication channel. Her voice echoed through every ship in the Third Fleet. "All vessels. This is Admiral Han Yuna. Battle stations. I repeat, battle stations. We deploy in 6 hours. Our mission is the liberation of Velen Prime. Prepare for combat operations." She closed the channel and looked at Coyote. "They asked for aid," she said softly. "They did not know what that means when you ask humanity." Coyote saluted. "Yes, Admiral." As he left to carry out her orders, Han Yuna turned back to the window. 312 ships. 50,000 soldiers. Weapons that could crack planets and technology that bent the laws of physics. The galaxy thought humans were soft. They smiled too much. They helped too freely. They talked about peace and friendship and cooperation. The galaxy had forgotten what humans really were. They were about to remember. Supreme Commander Vexthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crushing Fist, and watched Velen Prime burn below. His compound eyes reflected the orange glow of the fires, and his mandibles clicked with satisfaction. This was what he lived for. This was his purpose. The Drath Collective had conquered 17 worlds in the past 100 cycles. Velen Prime would be the 18th. The Velen people were weak. They had no real military. They believed in peace and diplomacy. They thought they could talk their way out of any problem. Now they were learning the truth. In the galaxy, the strong took what they wanted, and the weak simply died. Status report, Vexthal commanded. His voice a harsh buzzing sound that made his officers flinch. The southern continent is fully secured. Supreme Commander, one of his lieutenants, reported. Northern resistance is collapsing. We estimate complete planetary control within 10 cycles. Excellent. Vexthal's mandibles clicked again. And the orbital blockade? 40 warships information. No vessel can enter or leave the system without our permission. The Velen are completely isolated. Vexthal turned away from the view screen. Everything was going according to plan. The Galactic Council had made some noise about intervention, but they would do nothing. They never did. The council was made up of cowards who talked while others acted. There was only one small concern. His intelligence officers had reported that the Velen had sent a distress call to the humans. But Vexthal was not worried about the humans. He had studied them. They were new to the galactic stage. They had only been part of the council for 50 cycles. They spent their time building schools and hospitals. They talked about peace and cooperation. They were soft, weak. They would probably send a ship full of food and medicine, and then cry when they saw they could not land it. Vexthal almost hoped they would try. He would enjoy destroying them. Supreme Commander. A sensor officer suddenly shouted, his voice filled with alarm. We are detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. Vexthal spun around. What kind of signatures? Flail exits, sir. Multiple ships incoming. The main view screen flickered and changed, showing a sector of empty space near the system's outer boundary. Vexthal watched with growing confusion as the fabric of space itself seemed to tear open. Ships began to emerge. 110, 50, 100. They kept coming. 312. Human vessels dropped out of faster than light. Travel in perfect formation. They arranged themselves in a geometric pattern that would have been beautiful if it was not so terrifying. Battleships the size of small moons. Aircraft carriers bristling with fighter bays. Destroyers and frigates and assault ships, all painted in the dark gray colors of the United Earth Fleet. The bridge of the Crushing Fist fell silent. Even Vexthal felt his confidence waver for a moment. 300 ships, his sensor officer whispered. Supreme Commander, they brought 300 ships. Vexthal forced his mandibles to stop trembling. This was unexpected, but he was still in control. He had 40 warships. The humans had more, yes, but the Droth were experienced warriors. They had conquered countless worlds. These humans were newcomers. They had never fought a real war. Open a communication channel, he ordered. Let us see what these humans want. Before he could send his message, the human fleet broadcast first. Every ship in the Drath fleet received the same transmission. Every screen showed the same image. A human female appeared. She wore a simple gray uniform and sat in a chair that looked almost too big for her small body. Her face was calm. Her eyes were steady. She did not look afraid. I am Admiral Han Yuna of the United Earth Fleet, she said. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. You have attacked a protected species under Galactic Council jurisdiction. You have committed crimes against innocent civilians. You have ignored all warnings and pleas for peace." She paused for a moment. "You have 60 seconds to surrender unconditionally and withdraw from the system. All Drath ships will power down their weapons and engines. All Drath soldiers on the surface will lay down their arms. You will face justice before the Galactic Council for your crimes." Another pause. "If you do not comply, we will remove you by force. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. Vexthal stared at the empty screen. Then he started to laugh. His mandibles clicked together so hard that they made a sound like breaking glass. "She threatens us," he said, still laughing. "This tiny female threatens the Drath Collective? She brings aid workers with guns and thinks she can frighten us?" His officers laughed with him, though some of their laughter sounded nervous. "All ships," Vexthal commanded. "Attack formation. Destroy the human fleet." The 40 Drath warships moved forward, their weapons charging. Plasma cannons glowed with deadly energy. Missile tubes opened. The Drath had crushed dozens of enemies with this exact formation. They fired. A wave of plasma bolts and missiles raced toward the human fleet. Thousands of projectiles filled the space between the two forces. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The human ships did not dodge. They did not try to intercept the weapons. They simply accelerated forward, directly into the barrage. Vexthal watched in confusion. Were they surrendering? Were they committing suicide? The missiles hit. The plasma struck. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. And the human ships kept coming. Their hulls were scorched. Their armor was damaged. But they did not slow down. They did not stop. They flew through the wall of fire like it was nothing more than rain. "Impossible," Vexthal breathed. "How?" The answer came a moment later as the human ships crashed directly into the Drath formation. They did not fire. They did not need to. They simply rammed through the enemy fleet at full speed. Vexthal had forgotten one crucial detail about humans. They came from a world with gravity 10 times stronger than most species could survive. Their ships were built to handle that gravity. Their hulls were reinforced to withstand pressures that would crush any Drath vessel like an egg. The Drath ships exploded on contact. They shattered like glass hitting stone. 18 warships were destroyed in seconds, torn apart by the simple force of collision. Now the humans fired. Admiral Han Yuna watched the battle from her command chair. Her face showed no emotion. She had seen war before. She knew what it cost. "Target the remaining enemy vessels," she ordered calmly. "Disable their engines first. We want prisoners if possible." "Yes, Admiral," Captain Kote responded. The human weapons were unlike anything the Drath had faced. Railguns fired metal slugs at a fraction of the speed of light. Energy weapons cut through shields like hot knives through butter. Electronic warfare systems blinded enemy sensors and disabled their communications. The Drath fought back with everything they had. Their warriors were brave. Their captains were experienced. But it did not matter. The humans were better. They moved with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. Their ships danced through the battlefield like they were controlled by a single mind. They covered each other, supported each other, protected each other. When one ship was damaged, another moved to shield it. This was not the chaotic violence of animals. This was organized, disciplined, purposeful destruction. This was the warfare of a species that had spent its entire history fighting itself, perfecting the art of killing until it became almost beautiful in its efficiency. 20 minutes. That was how long it took. In 20 minutes, the Drath fleet was crippled. 27 ships destroyed. 13 disabled. Only 7 managed to escape the killing field. retreating toward Velen Prime in desperate flight. Vexthal was aboard one of those 7 ships. His flagship, the Crushing Fist, was damaged but still functional. He stood on his ruined bridge, surrounded by dead officers and sparking consoles, and tried to understand what had just happened. They had lost. The mighty Drath Collective had been defeated by a species that built schools and talked about peace. By a species that smiled and helped strangers and called themselves humanitarian workers. His communication officer was still alive, though badly wounded. "Send a message to the homeworld," Vexthal ordered, his voice hollow. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them what the humans really are." "What should I say, Supreme Commander?" the officer asked weakly. Vexthal looked at the viewscreen. The human fleet was already moving toward the planet. They were not chasing the survivors. They did not need to. They knew there was nowhere to run. "Tell them," he said slowly, "that we made a mistake. Tell them that we attacked a Deathworld species. Tell them that when humans offer help, they do not come as servants. They come as executioners." He paused, his compound eyes reflecting the distant flashes of the human ships. "And tell them that we are not sure we are going to survive the night." On the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, Admiral Han Yuna received the battle report. 33 enemy ships eliminated, 7 retreating, 0 human ships destroyed, 17 damaged, but all repairable. She allowed herself a small nod of satisfaction. "Signal the surface forces," she ordered. "Tell them to prepare for drop operations. We are going to liberate this planet." Kote hesitated. "The Drath still have thousands of soldiers on the ground, Admiral. They are holding civilian hostages." Han Yuna stood and walked to the viewscreen. Below her, Velen Prime turned slowly, its surface scarred by war. "Then we will be careful. Those people asked for help, and we will give." Lieutenant Behana checked her powered armor one last time as the drop pod screamed through the atmosphere of Velen Prime. Around her, the soldiers of the 7th Drop Infantry sat in silence, their faces hidden behind sealed helmets. They had done this 100 times in training. But this was different. This was real. The pod shook violently as it hit the lower atmosphere. Warning lights flashed. The internal temperature climbed despite the cooling systems. Hannah felt sweat dripping down her back, but her hands were steady on her rifle. 30 seconds to landing, the computer announced. Hannah activated her squad communication channel. "Listen up. Our target is the capital city. The Drath are holding thousands of Velen civilians in the central square. Our mission is simple. Kill the Drath. Save the civilians. Any questions?" Silence. Her soldiers knew their jobs. "Good. Remember your training. Move fast, stay low, and watch each other's backs. These bugs have never faced humans before. Let us show them why that was a mistake." The pod slammed into the ground with enough force to crack stone. The doors blew open, and Hana was moving before the dust had settled. Her powered armor amplified her movements, turning each step into a leap that covered 10 meters. She could feel the planet's weak gravity pulling at her, making her feel like she could fly. The capital city of Velen Prime was a ruin. Buildings that once reached toward the sky were now broken shells. Streets that once held crowds of peaceful citizens were littered with rubble and bodies. Smoke rose from a dozen fires, turning the air thick and gray. But the Velen people were still alive. Hannah could see them huddled in doorways and hiding in basements. Their large eyes watched the human soldiers with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "Contact!" Sergeant Yunde shouted through the communication channel. Hannah turned to see Drath soldiers pouring out of a nearby building. They were tall and insect-like, with hard shells covering their bodies and multiple limbs holding various weapons. Their compound eyes glittered with hatred as they opened fire. Plasma bolts filled the air. One struck Hyundai directly in the chest. He staggered back, smoke rising from the impact point. Any other species would have died. The Drath knew this. Their plasma weapons had killed thousands of enemies across dozens of worlds. But Hyundai was human. And humans were built different. He looked down at the burn mark on his armor. Then he looked up at the Drath soldier who had shot him. A smile spread across his face behind his helmet. "My turn," he said. His rifle spoke twice. The Drath soldier fell, then another. The rest of the squad opened fire, and within seconds, the enemy position was cleared. Hana did not stop moving. There were more Drath ahead, and more Velen civilians who needed saving. The ground war for Velen Prime was unlike anything the Drath had experienced. They were used to fighting species that were weaker than them. Species that ran when threatened. Species that surrendered when the battle turned against them. Humans did none of these things. They advanced through the city like a force of nature. Their powered armor shrugged off plasma fire that would have killed any Velen soldier. Their weapons cut through draft shells like they were made of paper. Their movements were fast and precise, coordinated by training and instinct. But what truly terrified the Drath was not the human weapons or armor. It was their behavior. The humans did not kill indiscriminately. They could have. They had the firepower to level entire city blocks. But instead, they moved carefully, precisely. They went out of their way to avoid civilian casualties. They risked their own lives to protect people they had never met. Drath commander named Crix watched from a rooftop as a human soldier threw himself in front of a plasma blast meant for a Velen child. The soldier's armor absorbed the hit. He rose, killed the Drath who had fired, and then gently picked up the child and carried her to safety. Crix did not understand. Why would someone risk death for a stranger? Why would a warrior show mercy in battle? It made no sense. He would never get the chance to figure it out. A moment later, a human sniper ended his confusion permanently. Lieutenant Bayhanna reached the central square after 2 hours of fighting. What she saw there made her blood boil. Thousands of Velen civilians were packed into the open space, surrounded by Drath soldiers with weapons pointed at their heads. The Drath commander, a massive specimen with gold markings on his shell, stood on a raised platform in the center. "Human," he shouted, his voice amplified by speakers. "I know you can hear me. Come any closer, and I will kill every single hostage. We will start with the children." Hana stopped at the edge of the square. Her squad spread out behind her, taking positions in the surrounding buildings. "Think carefully about your next words," she replied, her voice calm despite the rage burning inside her. "You are surrounded. Your fleet is destroyed. Your soldiers are dying. This is over." The Drath commander laughed, a harsh clicking sound. "Over? No, human, this is not over. I have 8,000 soldiers and 10,000 hostages. You cannot attack without killing them all." Hana removed her helmet. She wanted him to see her face. She wanted him to see her eyes. The Velen civilians gasped at the sight of her. To them, she looked terrifying. Her eyes faced forward like a predator's. Her teeth were flat but designed for tearing meat. Her skin was a strange pinkish color that seemed almost unnatural, but there was something else in her face. Something the Drath commander did not understand. Something the Velen civilians recognized immediately. Compassion. "I am going to give you one chance," Hana said slowly. "Release the hostages. Lay down your weapons. Surrender to us, and you will be treated fairly. You will face justice, but you will live." The commander's mandibles clicked with contempt. "And if I refuse?" Hana smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Then every single one of your soldiers dies in the next 4 hours. And you will watch each one fall before we come for you." The commander hesitated. For a moment, Hana thought he might actually be considering surrender. Then his pride overcame his fear. "Kill the first 100 hostages," he ordered. The Drath soldiers raised their weapons. Hana's response was immediate. "Execute Phase 3. Across the city, every human soldier moved at once. Snipers who had been quietly taking positions for the past hour opened fire simultaneously. 47 Drath soldiers fell in the first second, each one killed by a perfectly placed shot to the head. The civilians screamed and scattered. The remaining Drath soldiers tried to fire, but they were confused and panicked. More shots came from every direction. Human soldiers burst from side streets and buildings, their weapons blazing. It was not a battle. It was a surgical operation. Hana herself moved through the chaos like a dancer. Her rifle barked again and again, each shot finding a target. She dodged plasma bolts that moved too slowly to touch her. She jumped obstacles that would have stopped any Velen. She was faster, stronger, and more precise than any of the Drath had imagined possible. The commander tried to run. Sergeant Hyundai caught him. "Where do you think you were going?" Hyundai asked, grabbing the Drath by his throat. Even through his powered armor, his grip was strong enough to crack shell. The commander struggled, but it was useless. The human's hands were like steel. "Please," the commander gasped. "Please, I surrender. I surrender." Hyundai looked at him for a long moment. Then he threw the commander to the ground. "You should have surrendered before you threatened children," he said coldly. Hana approached. Around her, the sounds of battle were fading. Her soldiers were securing the area, tending to wounded civilians, and rounding up surviving Drath prisoners. She knelt beside the fallen commander. "You made a mistake," she told him. "You thought we were soft. You thought we were weak. You saw our hospitals and schools and thought that meant we had forgotten how to fight." She leaned closer. "We come from a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We survived ice ages. We survived plagues that killed billions. We survived predators that could tear us apart. We survived each other, which was the hardest thing of all." She stood. "We did not forget how to be predators. We just choose not to be. Most of the time." The battle for the capital was over. 8,000 Drath soldiers had been neutralized in 4 hours. 3,000 were dead. The rest were prisoners. Human casualties, 17 wounded. 0 killed. Velen civilian casualties, none. As the sun set over the ruined city, Hana stood in the central square. The civilians who had been hostages were being treated by human medical teams. Children who had been terrified moments ago were now being fed and comforted. A young Velen child approached her. He was small and blue, with huge eyes that reflected the fading light. He looked up at Hana with an expression she could not quite read. "Are you a monster?" he asked in a tiny voice. Hana knelt down to meet his eyes. She remembered the stories the galaxy told about humans. Deathworlders, apex predators, the most dangerous species in known space. "Yes," she said gently. "We are monsters. The most terrible monsters in the galaxy." The child's eyes widened with fear. Hana reached out and softly touched his shoulder. "But we are your monsters now. And monsters from Earth have one rule. We protect the innocent. Always." The child stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Thank you," he whispered. Hana smiled back. "You are welcome." Above them, the stars were coming out. Supreme Commander Vexthal had retreated to the dark side of Velen Prime's largest moon. His 7 remaining ships huddled together like frightened animals, their engines cold, their weapons powered down. They were hiding, hoping the humans would simply forget about them. It was a foolish hope, and Vexthal knew it. But he had no other options left. 24 hours ago, he had commanded 40 warships and 8,000 soldiers. He had been on the edge of conquering an entire world. He had been confident, powerful, unstoppable. Now he had nothing. His fleet was destroyed. His army was captured or dead. His dreams of glory had turned to Ashdod, and the humans were coming. "Supreme Commander," his sensor officer said weakly. The young Drath was the only surviving member of his original bridge crew. "I am detecting movement from the human fleet. How many ships?" Vexthal asked, though he already knew the answer would bring no comfort. "All of them, sir. The entire fleet is moving toward our position." Vexthal closed his compound eyes. 300 ships. To hunt 7. It was not a pursuit. It was a message. "Incoming transmission," the sensor officer reported. Vexthal opened his eyes. "Put it through." The view screen flickered, and Admiral Han Yuna appeared. She looked exactly as she had in her first broadcast, calm and composed. There was no victory in her expression. No anger, no satisfaction. Just a quiet certainty that made Vexthal feel very small. "Supreme Commander Vexthal," she said, "you have exactly 1 minute to surrender your remaining ships. This is not a negotiation. This is not an offer. This is your final warning." Vexthal's mandibles trembled. His pride screamed at him to fight, to die with honor, to take as many humans with him as possible. But his pride had already cost him everything. What good was honor when your entire species might be next? "If I surrender," he said slowly, "what happens to my crews? What happens to my people?" Han Yuna tilted her head slightly. "Your crews will be detained and transported to a neutral world. They will face trial before the Galactic Council for war crimes committed on Velen Prime. Those found guilty will be punished according to council law. Those found innocent will be released. And if I refuse, then your ships will be destroyed. Your crews will die. And the Drath Collective will receive a message from the United Earth Fleet explaining exactly why." She leaned forward slightly. "Make no mistake, Supreme Commander. We know where your homeworld is. We know where your colonies are. We know where your children sleep. If you choose to die here today, you will not be dying alone. The Drath Collective will learn that attacking protected species has consequences. Permanent consequences." Vexthal felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. This was not a bluff. He could see it in her eyes. She would do exactly what she said. She would hunt the Drath across the galaxy if necessary. "You would destroy an entire species?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "For attacking one world?" Han Yuna's expression did not change. "We would do whatever is necessary to protect the innocent. If that means becoming the galaxy's executioner, then so be it. Humans have already destroyed ourselves countless times throughout our history. We have survived plagues, wars, and disasters that should have ended us. We are not afraid of violence. We are not afraid of death. And we are definitely not afraid of you." She paused. "But we prefer not to kill. We prefer to build. We prefer to heal. We prefer to help others grow and prosper. That is why we joined the Galactic Council. That is why we sent aid to Velen Prime. Not because we are weak, but because we are strong enough to choose mercy." Her eyes hardened. "But do not mistake our mercy for weakness. Do not mistake our compassion for vulnerability. We offer you a choice, Supreme Commander. Surrender and face justice, or fight and face extinction. Choose." The bridge of the crushing fist was silent. Every surviving Drath officer was staring at Vexthal, waiting for his decision. They were afraid. They wanted to live. They had families back home, children who would never know what happened to their parents if they died here. Vexthal thought about his own family. His mate waiting for him on the homeworld. His larvae still too young to understand what war meant. If he died here, they would never know the truth. They would only know that he failed. But if he surrendered, They might live. The collective might survive. There might be a future. I surrender, he said quietly. The words felt like poison in his mouth, but he forced himself to continue. All Drath ships, power down your weapons and engines. Do not resist. I repeat, do not resist. One by one, the 7 remaining ships went dark. Their weapons powered down. Their shields dropped. They drifted in space, helpless and vulnerable. Admiral Han Yuna nodded slowly. A wise choice, Supreme Commander. Captain Kote, send transport ships to collect the prisoners and make sure they are treated fairly. They surrendered honorably. Kote looked surprised. Admiral, we are not monsters, Captain. We do not torture prisoners. We do not execute those who surrender. That is what separates us from the Drath. She turned back to the view screen. Supreme Commander Vexthal, you and your crews will be detained aboard our vessels until we can transfer you to the Galactic Council. You will be given food, water, and medical care. You will not be harmed. Vexthal did not know how to respond. He had expected cruelty. He had expected revenge. Instead, he was being offered something he had never shown his enemies: mercy. Why? He asked finally. Why are you doing this? We killed your people. We attacked your allies. We threatened everything you built. Why do you not simply destroy us? Han Yuna was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. Because someone has to be better. Someone has to break the cycle of violence. Someone has to show that strength and compassion can exist together. She stood up from her chair. Humans have done terrible things throughout our history. We have committed genocides. We have started wars that killed millions. We have been cruel and hateful and destructive in ways that still haunt us today. She walked toward the view screen. But we have also learned. We have grown. We have looked at the worst parts of ourselves and decided that we would be something different. Something better. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. She stopped. The galaxy thinks we are monsters because we come from a death world. They think we are dangerous because we evolved as predators. And they are not wrong. We can be the most terrible species in existence when we choose to be. Her eyes met Vexthal's through the screen. But we can also be the most compassionate, the most protective, the most forgiving. That is the choice we make every day. That is the choice I make right now. You will face justice, Supreme Commander, but you will not face destruction. Your species will survive. And perhaps, in time, you will learn the same lessons we did. She turned away. End transmission. The screen went dark. Vexthal sat in his command chair, surrounded by the ruins of everything he had built, and tried to understand what had just happened. He had gone to war with monsters and discovered that the monsters were more humane than he had ever been. He did not know whether to feel grateful or ashamed. Perhaps both. Hours later, human transport ships arrived to collect the prisoners. The Drath crews were processed quickly and efficiently. Their weapons were confiscated. Their identities were recorded. Then they were led to holding areas that were clean, well-lit, and surprisingly comfortable. Medical teams treated the wounded. Food was distributed. Translators were provided so the prisoners could communicate with their captors. One young Drath soldier approached a human guard with a question that had been burning in his mind. "Why are you feeding us?" he asked. "We are your enemies." The guard, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, looked at him for a moment. "You were our enemies," she corrected. "Now you are our prisoners. And we do not starve prisoners. We do not beat them. We do not hurt them. That is not who we are." The soldier was confused. "But we killed your people." "Yes, you did. And you will face justice for that. But justice is not revenge. Justice is not cruelty. Justice is giving everyone what they deserve. Good and bad. She handed him a food pack. Eat. Rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. As the young soldier ate, he thought about everything he had been taught about humans. The story said they were bloodthirsty killers from a hellish world. The story said they were barely civilized savages who had stumbled into space through luck and violence. The stories had been wrong. These humans were something far more complicated, far more dangerous, and far more admirable than anything he had expected. They were monsters who had learned to be kind, warriors who had chosen to be merciful, predators who protected the weak instead of preying on them. For the first time in his life, the young soldier wondered if perhaps the Drath Collective had been the real villains all along. Aboard the Eternal Dawn, Admiral Han Yuna finally allowed herself to rest. The battle was over. The prisoners were secured. Velen Prime was free. Coyote found her staring out the observation window at the planet below. "It is beautiful," he said quietly. "It is," she agreed. "And it is safe now. At least for a while. Do you think the Drath will ever attack again?" Han Yuna considered the question carefully. "Not this generation. Maybe not the next. They have seen what happens when they threaten our allies. They will remember." She turned to face him. "But there will always be others." One cycle after the liberation, Velen Prime was beginning to heal. The fires were finally out. The rubble was being cleared. The bodies were being buried with proper respect. And everywhere, humans were working alongside Velen to rebuild what had been destroyed. Ambassador Cole walked through the streets of his capital city, still hardly believing what he was seeing. Human engineers operated heavy machinery, clearing debris and laying foundations for new buildings. Human doctors worked in field hospitals, treating the wounded and sick. Human soldiers stood guard at key points, their weapons ready but their faces friendly. And everywhere, the Velen people were starting to smile again. A month ago, Cole had sent a desperate message across the stars, begging for food and medicine. He had expected at best a small relief ship, perhaps some supplies and a few volunteers willing to help. Instead, he had received an army, a fleet, a force of Deathworlders who had crossed the galaxy to save people. They had never met. It was still hard to understand. He found Admiral Han Yuna near the ruins of the Grand Assembly Hall. She was speaking with a group of Velen engineers, discussing the reconstruction plans. When she saw Cole approaching, she excused herself and walked to meet him. "Ambassador," she said, bowing slightly in the Velen fashion. "I hope the morning finds you well." Cole returned the bow. "As well as can be expected, Admiral. I have been walking through the city. I wanted to see what your people have accomplished." Han Yuna smiled slightly. "We have done what we could. There is still much work to be done." "Much work," Cole agreed. He paused, struggling to find the right words. "Admiral, I must confess something to you." "Yes?" "When I sent that distress call to Earth, I was desperate. I had tried everything else. The Galactic Council refused to help. Our neighbors were too afraid to intervene. You were our last hope." He looked at her directly. "But I never expected this. I asked for bandages and bread. Instead, you sent 300 warships and 50,000 soldiers. You destroyed a fleet that had terrorized this region of space for a century. You liberated a world that had been conquered by a force 10 times larger than any military we could ever have fielded." Han Yuna listened quietly, her expression neutral. "I have to ask you," Cole continued. "Why? Why did you come? Why did you risk so much for a species you barely knew? We have nothing to offer you. We are not wealthy. We are not powerful. We are just a small, peaceful people who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time." Han Yuna was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. Ambassador, may I tell you a story? Cole nodded. When humans were still young, still learning how to survive on our death world, we were weak. We had no claws, no fangs, no armor. We were prey for almost everything that moved. By every measure, we should have gone extinct. She began walking, and Cole fell into step beside her. But we survived. Do you know why? Because you learned to fight? Cole guessed. Partly. But that alone would not have been enough. A single human is no match for a lion or a bear or any of the other predators that hunted us. No, we survived because we learned something more important than fighting. She stopped and turned to face him. We learned to cooperate, to help each other, to protect the weak and care for the sick. We learned that a group of humans working together could accomplish things that no individual could ever do alone. Her eyes were intense now, burning with a quiet passion. That is the secret of our species, Ambassador. Not our strength, not our aggression, not our ability to survive on a world that tried to kill us every day. It is our capacity for compassion, our instinct to protect those who cannot protect themselves, our stubborn, irrational refusal to abandon anyone who needs help. She gestured at the city around them. You asked why we came. This is why. Because you needed help. Because no one else would give it. Because we could not live with ourselves if we sat in safety while innocent people suffered. Cole felt something stirring in his chest. A warmth he had not felt since before the war. That is remarkable, he said quietly. No, Han Yuna replied. It is simply who we are. We are not saints. We are not perfect. We have made terrible mistakes throughout our history, and we will probably make more in the future. But we try. We try to be better. We try to help. We try to make the galaxy a little kinder than we found it. She smiled. That is why we joined the Galactic Council. Not to conquer, not to dominate, but to be part of something larger, something good. They walked in silence for a while, passing through streets that were slowly coming back to life. Velen children played in the rubble, watched over by human soldiers who smiled and waved. Velen merchants were setting up temporary shops, selling food and supplies that human transports had brought from across the galaxy. Life was returning to Velen Prime. It would take time, but the world would heal. Eventually, they reached the spaceport, where the Eternal Dawn and its escort ships were preparing to depart. Most of the human fleet had already left, returning to their posts throughout the galaxy. But a significant force would remain to protect Velen Prime until its defenses could be rebuilt. You are leaving, Cole said. It was not a question. Our work here is done, Han Yuna replied. Your world is safe. Your people are recovering. You do not need soldiers anymore. You need builders, healers, teachers. We will send those too. She extended her hand in the human fashion. It has been an honor, Ambassador Cole. Cole took her hand. It felt strange, the grip of a Deathworlder. But he did not flinch. The honor was mine. Admiral Han Yuna, I do not know how to thank you for what you have done. Han Yuna shook his hand firmly. You do not need to thank us. Just remember this day. Remember that when you called for help, someone answered. And if you ever see another world in need, another people crying out for aid, do what we did. She released his hand. Answer the call. She turned and walked toward her shuttle, her officers falling into step behind her. Captain Kote, Lieutenant Behana, Sergeant Yunde, all the humans who had fought and bled and risked everything to save a world they had never seen before. Cole watched them go, his heart full of emotions he could not name. The shuttle lifted off, rising through the atmosphere toward the orbiting fleet. Cole watched until it disappeared from sight. Then he turned and walked back to the city. There was work to do. In the months that followed, the story of Velen Prime spread across the galaxy. Every species heard about the day the Drath Collective attacked a peaceful world, and the humans responded with overwhelming force. Every empire heard about the fleet of Deathworlders, who crossed the stars to save strangers. Some species were frightened by the story. They saw the humans as dangerous, unpredictable, a threat to be feared and avoided. Others were inspired. They saw the humans as proof that strength and compassion could coexist. That power did not have to mean cruelty, that the strong could choose to protect the weak instead of exploiting them. And some, a few brave souls, decided to follow the human example. They joined the relief efforts. They volunteered for peacekeeping missions. They stood up against bullies and tyrants, knowing that they were not alone. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, painfully, but unmistakably changing. And it all began with a distress call. On the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, Admiral Han Yuna received reports from across human space. The Drath prisoners had been transferred to the Galactic Council for trial. The reconstruction of Velen Prime was proceeding ahead of schedule, and there were new distress calls coming in from a dozen other worlds. She read each report carefully, then set them aside. Where to next, Admiral? Kyote asked. Han Yuna looked at the star map. So many lights, so many worlds, so many people who might need help someday. There is a colony in the Outer Rim, she said. Pirates have been attacking their trade ships. They have asked for assistance. Kyote nodded. Shall I set a course? Han Yuna smiled. Yes, Captain. Set a course. The Eternal Dawn turned toward the stars and began its journey. Behind it, the rest of the fleet followed, a river of steel and purpose flowing through the void. They were not conquerors. They were not saviors. They were simply humans, doing what humans had always done, helping those who needed it, fighting for those who could not fight for themselves, and reminding the galaxy, one rescue at a time, that the monsters from the Death World were nothing to fear. Unless you threatened the innocent Dot, then they were everything to fear. On Velen Prime, Ambassador Cole stood on the balcony of the newly rebuilt Grand Assembly Hall and watched the sun set over his recovering world. The fires were gone. The armies were gone. But the humans had left something behind that would never fade. Hope. He thought about Admiral Han Yuna's words. Answer the call. He made a decision then and there. When Velen Prime was strong again, when his people had healed and rebuilt, they would not sit in safety while others suffered. They would remember what the humans had done for them. They would honor that sacrifice by paying it forward. The galaxy was vast and full of darkness, but it was also full of light if you knew where to look. And sometimes, Cole thought, the brightest light came from the most unexpected places, from a blue and green world called Earth, from a species that should have terrified the galaxy. From the Deathworlders who chose to be heroes. The sun sank below the horizon and the stars came out. Somewhere up there, the human fleet was traveling to its next mission. Somewhere up there, more lives were about to